So hopefully you guys have already heard the story about the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. Now, he was a journalist in Saudi Arabia who was critical of the government, and he was murdered upon the entry of a Saudi consulate within Turkey in Istanbul. Now, again, he was killed essentially for being critical of the crown prince there. Mohammed bin Salman is the head of the government there. Saudi Arabia, as you guys I'm sure know, is a horrendous government, possibly the worst on planet Earth. They do insane things like beheading atheists. They're massively sexist. They just began allowing women to drive. Saudi Arabia is a horrible fucking country. So, I've barely been talking at all. This video is one of those videos about to get demonetized the fuck out of it. This is crazy. So, Donald Trump said that this is another case of guilty until proven innocent. So this is going to be a situation now where this basically becomes like this sort of talking point in the right, I guess, where just every situation is just, oh, you're being guilty and proven innocent. We now have audio from Turkey, from the Turkish intelligence agency, and they have insane details. So this article from the New York Times says, his killers were waiting when Jamal Khashoggi walked into the Saudi consulate in Istanbul 2 weeks ago. They severed his fingers and later beheaded and dismembered him, according to details from audio recordings described by a senior Turkish official on Wednesday. Mr. Khashoggi was dead within minutes, and within 2 hours the killers were gone, the recording suggested. The leaking of such details on the same day Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was visiting Turkey reflected an escalation of pressure by the Turkish government on Saudi Arabia and the United States for answers on the fate of Mr. Khashoggi, a prominent dissident journalist who wrote for the Washington Post. More than 2 weeks after he entered the consulate in Istanbul and was never seen coming out, the Saudis have yet to give an explanation. It says top Saudi officials have repeatedly denied any involvement in Mr. Khashoggi's disappearance, denials that they repeated to Mr. Pompeo when he visited Saudi Arabia on Tuesday. It says a team of 15 Saudi agents, some with ties to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, was waiting for Mr. Khashoggi inside the Saudi consulate the moment he arrived at about 1:15 p.m. October 2nd. After he was shown into the office of the Saudi consul, Mohammed al-Otaibi, the agent seized Mr. Khashoggi almost immediately and began to beat and torture him, eventually cutting off his fingers, the senior Turkish official said. Quote, do this outside, you will put me in trouble, Mr. al-Otaibi told them, according to the Turkish official and a report in the Turkish newspaper, Yeni Şafak, both citing audio recordings said to have been obtained by Turkish intelligence. Quote, if you want to live when you come back to Arabia, shut up, one of the agents replied, as they cut off Mr. Khashoggi's head and dismembered his body. A doctor of forensics who had been brought along for the dissection and disposal had some advice for the others, according to the senior Turkish official. Listen to music, he told them, as he put on headphones himself. That was what he did to ease the tension when doing such work, the official said. Such information would not have been disclosed in Turkey without the consent of the government. Turkish media outlets and newspapers are closely controlled. It says the Turkish leaks implicating Saudi officials in the Khashoggi case have followed a distinctive pattern, beginning quickly after his disappearance. The leaks stopped as diplomatic steps to address the matter escalated. King Salman of Saudi Arabia called President Recep Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey and sent a high-level delegation, while President Trump suggested that he was taking the accusations seriously and sent Mr. Pompeo to Saudi Arabia for answers. So these are insane details. I want to repeat that. Unbelievably disgusting and gruesome details. This is crazy. So first of all, they cut off his fingers. They severed the man's fingers, but they also cut off his head and dismembered his fucking body. And I guess it was so difficult to stand for the agents and the people doing it, for obvious reasons, because you're dismembering someone's body. They listened to music to alleviate that sort of feeling. Holy mother of God. A fucking dissident journalist got dismembered in a Saudi consulate in Turkey. So what does this mean? A, we should have never been selling arms to these fuckers in the first place. But B, we should not have any relations with these fucks. C, we need to put heavy sanctions on these fucks. And whether or not we should do any sort of regime change, honestly, I'm open to the idea of it because the government of Saudi Arabia is pretty much one of the worst governments there is because they are there are human rights violations across the board. You're talking about massive systemic it's not even systemic sexism, just outright sexism by law. Sexism by law. You're talking about murdering of, just butchering people for being atheist and shit like that. And you're talking about murdering and dismembering dissident journalists within your own nation. And bin Salman is a fuck. He's a piece of fuck, okay? So we should immediately stop all relations with these fuckers. Heavy, massive sanctions on these fuckers. And on top of that, should we do something in terms of removing the governmental officials there? I don't know. I'm open to the idea though, because there's so many human rights violations going on there that how much worse can the country of Saudi Arabia really get? I don't know. I'm open to the idea because this government, and I forgot to mention again that they fund like the majority of terrorism that goes on in the world. So we really have nothing to lose. I don't know, but man, those are fucking disgusting details. They legitimately took apart this man's body. There must be massive, I repeat, massive punishments for Saudi Arabia immediately.